Mark, and I just want to do a quick little video here. And the reason why I'm doing this video, I haven't did some in a while, but basically the reason why I'm doing this video is like this. When your child is born, you're a citizen of Canada, say, or a citizen of Australia, a citizen of the Commonwealth, or any of these fictitious countries and names. But anyhow, when you go to the hospital, say you're a mother, okay, you're the parents, whatever, you have a baby. Now you're a Canadian, okay, or you guys, both the parents are Canadians, we'll say. We'll use Canada as the term, okay? So effectively, as Canadians, they're using a Canadian service, which is the hospital. So therefore, when the child is born, they draw up a statement of live birth, which has no contractual anything on the child whatsoever. It's just a fact that indeed there was a baby born and that a miracle had taken place. Now, people are assuming now, because apparently, so here's the real situation I'm going to address. People assume because a statement of live birth was drawn up and then a social insurance number apparently and a birth certificate is sent to the parents immediately. So these people are running around going, well, how are my kids supposed to be free, even if they're Canadians, but say they don't even want to be Canadians, but they're kind of caught in that trap where, you know, the guy's got a class 1 driver's license, so if he loses his job, how is he going to support his family? So he remains a citizen. So you can see the pickle here, okay? But here's the goodness to this part. The parents, yes, there was a baby born, there was a statement of birth, of a live birth drawn up. Then the government immediately issues the parents a birth certificate and a social insurance number for that kid. Now these people are running around going, oh, well, my child's already been registered and my child is a Canadian. And no, the child is not a Canadian, the child is still a child of God. What happens is this, because you as parents are Canadians and you register the fact that there is a statement of a live birth at the hospital, which has no bearing on the child whatsoever other than, yes, there was a miracle and here it is. Now, effectively, people, when you receive the birth certificate and the social insurance number for that child, it's for the child, but there is no contractual anything with this child whatsoever. It would be, even the government of Canada knows, or any other local government knows, that it would be illegal, even in their words. I mean, legal is the undoing of God's law, but so it would be illegal for them to do business and to contract with the child. So that's why they give the parents the statement of live birth, the birth certificate, and the social insurance number. So the child right now, people, the parents are in charge of this, okay? So you're raising your kid and your child decides to throw a rock through a window. Well, you're in charge of that birth certificate and the social insurance number, which means that should your child do something, you are taking the responsibility, say if that child throws a rock through the window, to pay that charge, to pay that fine, or to pay for that window to get repaired. So you see where I'm going with this, people? So the government has no bearing as far as a contract with the child. Just because they say to you as parents, they say, here's a birth certificate and a social insurance number, all the government is doing is they're drawing up an insurance policy because they're assuming that you as a Canadian, you as parents as a Canadian, are going to raise your child to be a Canadian. You see where I'm going with this, people? So you have to understand this. So they assume that when the child turns 16 or 15 or whatever, you're going to hand the child the birth certificate and the statement of live birth and the social insurance number, and the kid's going to run out and start applying for jobs. Only then does that child become a Canadian. Okay, let me repeat this again, people. Only once that child uses that social insurance number and that birth certificate, which has been issued to the parents and they then give to the child to use to apply for employment or any government benefits, then the child becomes a Canadian. Then the child has agreed to become a duty-paying citizen. And look at the term duty. It refers to tax, right? So you have duties and privileges, right? So nonetheless, you have duties, rights, and duties. And for those rights, you have to pay the duty to have that right, right? You follow me? You just can't go travel on Canada's roads without being a Canadian Otherwise, they'll start assuming things, and things will go haywire. So it's an insurance policy drawn up for your child, even though your child isn't a Canadian yet. So if something were to happen to the child, where say the child winds up hospitalized, Canada has used the birth certificate as a bond and given that to the parents to allow the parents, as citizens of Canada, to use that at the hospital to pay for the Medicare or the health benefits or whatever, okay? So effectively, it goes like this. You're issued a birth certificate and a social insurance number for said child, and if that child winds up growing up and never uses that social insurance number and that birth certificate to apply for any benefits, rights, duties, or privileges that are imposed on by Canada, that child is not a Canadian. The child never was. The child would have to physically go out and use this stuff in order to be rendered a Canadian citizen. You see where I'm going with this, people? So please, people, stop with this. Well, they issued me a birth certificate and a social insurance number for my kid, so my child is already a slave, lock, stock, and barrel. That's not the way it goes, people. The bottom line is this: your children are free. Your children, believe it or not, all these Canadians, Americans, Australians, whatever, they may think that because they're born and they're Canadians, that their children are Canadians, and their children are not Canadians, people. Their children are not Canadians, and listen to what I'm saying here. It's very, very important. The child is not a Canadian unless he physically turns 14, 15, 18, 25 and goes out and applies for a job and takes that social insurance number and birth certificate from his parents and then starts using it. So if the child grows up, turns into a teeny bopper, teenager, adult, stuff like that, and never uses that birth certificate and that social insurance number, the child is not a Canadian. Though that statement of live birth and that birth certificate, even if the child is not a Canadian, has become an insurance policy to protect that child should the government of Canada do anything to that child, or a Canadian, or even a Canadian police officer, or anybody do any harm to that child whatsoever. It's the birth certificate and the social insurance number is that number and that policy number to make sure that should Canada do any harm to this child, that they have the funds to pay because they're bankrupt, okay? That's another talk show, but we're not going to get into that. So bottom line is this, people. Please stop saying, oh, well, I've got a birth certificate and a social insurance number, so my kid is a Canadian and my kid is a slave. No, that is just an insurance policy. Should Canada do something to that child, then they have the funds to look after that, okay? To make things better, to pay for hospital bills, whatever's going on here, okay, regarding said child. So the child is still a child of God, not of man. You follow me here? That's why the mother is called an M-other, okay? Effectively, it's God's child. And so to make a long story short, people, I hope you people get this. I know 99% of the people out there are, this guy's nuts. My kids are citizens of Canada, the States, whatever. No. If a baby is born in the United States and they issue the parents a birth certificate and the social insurance number immediately, the parent is in charge of that in case the kid should grow up and throw a rock through somebody's window or cause somebody harm. Now the parent is responsible for paying for the damage that for the window that maybe the child threw a rock through. You see where I'm going with this, people? It's all about taking responsibility for your children, okay? So effectively, you as a parent are on the hook and are in charge of that person. But that person has nothing to do with the child until the child physically goes out and applies for a job at Dairy Queen, Burger King, whatever, and says, yes, I'm using a social insurance number. I would like to belly up, ante up, and become a Canadian and pay taxes, okay? Those are called rights and duties, and duty is a tax, right? You cross the border, you pay duty, right? Duties, due ties, right? So of course citizens have rights and they have to pay for these rights. You have to pay for the right to travel, which effectively is fraud because the creator never asked you to go and pay for a license. So obviously legal is the undoing of God's law. It's just that simple, okay? God never asked man to deal with rights, duties, taxes, None of that stuff. The Creator gave you grace, but then we walked up and we started applying for jobs using a fictitious last name, and which is basically a slave trade name. Okay, so it's just this simple, people. So I'm going to reiterate this once again, then I'm going to turn this off. And I just had to do this because it's so important, and I hear all these people, well, I was issued a birth certificate and a social insurance number for my kid, and my child is thus a Canadian or an American citizen. No, people, it has nothing to do with the child. It is assumed that because you're a Canadian or you're American, that your child will probably be a Canadian or an American. You see where I'm going with this? So if your child never uses that birth certificate and that social insurance number, your child has nothing to do with Canada or the States, is not a citizen. Let me reiterate this again. Is not a citizen, is not a subject, is not a slave. They only become slaves once they use that birth certificate and that social insurance number. So I hope everybody finds this well. I mean, I know the government of Canada and the US and all these other governments, they're not going to like this video, but that's not my problem. That's not my concern. That's theirs, right? I mean, you want to run with fictitious stuff and charge people all the time, well, that's what you get, right? So the truth is the truth, and the truth doesn't care who you are, and that's the bottom line, and I'm just a servant of the Creator, and it's the Creator, it's the universe that speaks through me, okay? It's not even necessarily me. I mean, I'm not possessed here, but you see where I'm going with this? I am just a servant slash vehicle for the Creator, and it's kind of, I don't like the term duty because I'm not paying taxes, but it's, I'll use duty in the regular term. It's my duty to inform you guys that even though you've received these papers, it has no bearing on the situation whatsoever. Your child is not a citizen, is not a subject, is not a slave until they physically walk up and start applying for jobs using that birth certificate or that social insurance number or applying for government benefits, okay? If they never applied for government benefits, that birth certificate is an insurance policy to protect that child, or me, I'm not a Canadian. So I renounced all that. But effectively, if Canada were to do something, they're on the hook for that because I've agreed that I'm not on the hook, okay? So if somebody were to do something wrong to me or to your child because we're not citizens, then the government should fess up and ante up and pay that health care bill, pay for that window, pay for whatever it is, okay, people? So I know I've reiterated this a few times, but I keep hearing these people, oh, my children are Canadians, my children are Canadians, my children are Americans. No, your children are not Canadians, Americans, Aussies, whatever, until the parents physically, the child says, you know, Mom, Dad, I'm 18 years old, I think it's time I go get a job on the ship, the citizenship, okay, you see where I'm going with this, people? That birth certificate is on the ship. Everything these people do is on the ship, okay? So, and that's why it's called the citizenship. So the child is not on the ship unless he uses that birth certificate and that social insurance number. And it's just that simple. And why do you think they call these social insurance numbers SIN cards? You think you're entering into a world full of sin and debauchery when you become a citizen? Obviously, that's exactly what happens, and that's why they're called licenses, and that's derived from the word licentiousness, acts of the wicked. So, I know I'm babbling like a blithering idiot, but please, people, do understand this, okay? Your children are not citizens until they literally go out and use that birth certificate and that social insurance number. So if they never use that, you don't have to worry. Your children are free of becoming citizens. Just because you're a citizen doesn't mean your child is a citizen. And even the government of Canada and the United States and all these governments, they know that it's illegal. Even in their world, they deem it illegal. I mean, legal is the undoing of God's law, so obviously illegal is the undoing of God's law, right? Legal stems from gal, dame, right? Madame, right? Prostitution, right? You know, so anyhow, this was the oldest form of trade slash business, right? And that's why you take a hoe to a hotel, okay? So obviously there's a reason for all these things, but nonetheless, people, please stop with this nonsense that, well, the day my child was born, well, the government's issued me da-da-da-da-da, and well, now my child is a slave, lock, stock, gun and barrel. That is not the way it goes. Your child is not a slave until your child deems that the child says to Mom and Dad, I need those slave papers so that I can go be a slave and apply for a job with my sin card so I can thus become a sinner. Okay? So please, people, I'm not labeling people. I'm not doing any of that nonsense. It's, but the bottom line is people have to wake up. So hopefully this addresses the situation. And I know I keep reiterating the same things, but if I don't reiterate the same things, people come up and, oh, well, there's a trust in my name, and that is not your trust, people. This Seska V stuff is all bullshit. You're either a citizen, which equals a slave, which equals a subject, right? Which equals you'll never be free. You will always pay taxes. Repeat after me. If I pay taxes, will I be free? No, you will not be free. Okay, people? So no matter what the government draws up and they say, well, this has the child's name on it and stuff, that's fine. It's just an insurance policy to protect that child until that child decides that it wants to incur its own insurance policy by using that social insurance number and that birth certificate. Okay, people? So your child doesn't need any identification to traverse and travel and all that stuff. All the child needs is a statement of live birth, which proves that yes, there was a miracle of God, and that this child was born. It has nothing to do with other than it's a voucher, and that's why it's called a voucher. I mean, the child couldn't vouch for itself in the world, right? How would the child vouch for itself? It's a baby. It's coming out, and it's a goo gaga, puking on its shirt and shitting in its diapers. Obviously, the child can't verify nothing for itself. So the government has drawn up that statement of live birth to verify the fact that yes, indeed, there was a child born, a miracle of God, and that, that's that. And that statement of a live birth becomes the child's passport. Like if the government of Canada came up and said to the child, who are you? The child could say, well, here's a statement of live birth. Never the child saying, here's a SIN card and a driver's license and a birth certificate. No, the statement of the live birth is the voucher, and it has vouched for the fact that there is a miracle born, there was a child of God, and that thus becomes the child's passport. The child doesn't need the birth certificate and the social insurance number. The statement of live birth is the passport, okay? It's to let Canadians know that this child is not a Canadian in a Canadian world, okay? And it's all fiction to begin with. I mean, we all bleed red, so I don't care what color of skin you are, but then people run around, well, I'm Chinese, and I'm an American, and I'm this, and I'm that. So if I put a fictitious border around and I say this bunch is this and this bunch is that, people, it's all a fiction. All these names and titles, they're fictions. Give up the fiction. You don't need the fiction, okay? So once again, I'm going to reiterate this because I'm so tired of these people. Oh, well, my child's a slave the day he was born. No, your child is not a slave. Even the government of Canada or any world government recognizes this fact that the child is not a slave until the child decides to belly up, walk up and start using that birth certificate and that social insurance number and ask the parents to give them that so they can use that to apply for a job. And look at the word job, public mismanagement of funds for private dishonesty and gain. And that's exactly what we have going on in the world today, okay? So if the child never asked for this, for public mismanagement of funds to apply for a job, maybe it was an inside job. You can see where I'm going with this. Job don't sound too good already, right? I'm sure you love your job, people, honestly, right? That's why it's called a job. So you have to recognize this. So once again, the child is not a Canadian until the child literally says, Mom, Dad, can I have that birth certificate and that social insurance number which you are in charge of so that I can thus take that and apply for a job, and then I become in charge of my life and I pay duties and taxes and excises and all this stuff. That's why they're called toll gates, people. Toll. Okay? So once again, I'm going to leave it at this. I hope this video finds everybody well. I know lots of people, they're hitting me up, oh, well, can you help me with this and can you help me with that? No, people, I can't help you with anything. That would be very unloving for me to help you people do what you people are supposed to be doing yourselves, okay? Nobody helped me become a non-Canadian, okay? This was something I chose to do, and I wasn't running around going, can you help me do this and can you help me do that? No, I accepted total me-sponsibility. I don't deal with responsibility, I deal with me-sponsibility. I'm not responsible for shit that goes on in anybody's lives. I'm only responsible for not causing harm, damage, loss, or anybody to anybody, and I'm only responsible for me, and I call that me-sponsibility, okay? That's a friend's term, but I use that now. It's me-sponsibility, not responsibility, okay? So, you know, I just don't know what to say to you people. You know, somebody could tell somebody the truth and they'll, oh, you're a liar, you know, whatever. And then they get blasphemed. And then you're almost like Christ, where they want to kill you for doing a good deed and helping somebody. So you can see how this goes, and you take the M out of masses and you have asses. So effectively it was the asses that killed Christ. Okay, people, I don't care whether it was a parable or a fiction or a story, history, or if there actually was a man here. I mean, hey, groovy if there was. Cool. Even if there wasn't, it's an awesome parable. It's a good way to live your life. Thou shalt not kill. No, that makes sense. Okay, that's pretty simple, pimple. I get it. You know, thou shalt not covet thy wife. Okay, that's pretty cool. I'm not interested in my buddy's wife. You see where I'm going with this, people? You have to draw a line, right? So please, people, stop with this this nonsense that, oh, well, because I was issued a birth certificate and a social insurance number, my child is a slave. No, your child is not a slave until your kid comes out and physically says, Mom and Dad, can you give me that stupid birth certificate and social insurance number so I can go and apply for a world full of sin? Hence, social insurance number. SS numbers in Germany, SSN, right? SS Nazi, maybe. You people might want to look at this slop, okay? Even a buddy's child, he had applied, he had taken the, this was in the day where you actually still had to apply for the birth certificate. It wasn't issued, pre-issued to the parents, and he applied and he received a paper and it said, thank you for applying for your, get this, first sin. Not your first social insurance number, your first sin. You see where I'm going with this, people? Then once you apply to be in sin with your sin, then you're entering into a job, and a job is public mismanagement of funds for private dishonesty and gain. Okay, people? So till then, if the child never uses these papers, that's why the birth certificate states that it's not to be used as identification. So if the child never uses this for identification, the child is golden. Otherwise, if the child uses a birth certificate that states which is not to be used as identification, the child is already becoming a criminal. Do you see where I'm going with this, people? The birth certificate is a voucher, and it's simply to vouch for the fact that, yes, there was a statement of live birth done. Canada drew up an insurance policy should anything happen to your child. It's just that simple. It's an insurance policy for them to pay for anything that maybe they have done to that kid. Okay, people? You see where I'm going with this? It's just that simple. It's an insurance policy. Yes, it is a trust, but at the same time, it's not a trust for you to say, well, this is my Seska V trust and this is my property. It's obviously not your property, people. If it was your property, it would be physically in your hands. You'd be receiving dividends. You'd be making money off this stuff, but this is not the case. They're bankrupt. They have no money, and in their fictitious world of having no money, all they can do is pass IOU debt notes around, and they're all IOUs, okay? So that's all they're doing, is passing these fictitious debt notes around, and these fictitious debt notes are used to cover your child in case of hospital emergencies, or maybe the authorities did something to the child. This money is used to cover this, or the parents that did something to the child, okay? So yes, the governments are like parent padre in the sense that you're allowing them to take responsibility to help look after this child. But once that child is 18 and that child has never used that birth certificate and that SIN number, and all he needs is identification, is a statement of live birth. That's it. No birth certificate, as it says that it's illegal to use the birth certificate as identification. So even in a world where people, if you still have to apply for a birth certificate, now you're applying for something that says it shouldn't be used as ID, You're using it as ID because it's the government's ID, not yours. Now you're claiming something that doesn't belong to you, and that makes you a criminal. And that's why the birth certificate is not to be used as ID. So if it says that right on the birth certificate, why would you want to give your kid something that says this is not to be used as ID? So then you're going to break the law by using it as identification to get a social insurance number. But once again, that's all changed now. The SINs and the birth certificates are issued to the parents right off the bat. And look at the words, is sued. They've sued this stuff. They've liened this stuff, which tells you that they have a copyright on this, and this is their fictional property. So don't you go app lying, keywords app lying, to become an app lie can't, because you can no longer lie, because you're app lying stating that you are a fictitious person by using a birth certificate which states that this is not to be used as ID. So already, if you're using a birth certificate that's not to be used as ID, and it says this right on the front of it, then why would you use something that is not yours? And that would make you a criminal. It's just that simple, people. So anyhow, once again, I'm going to reiterate this because people are so hard-headed out there. Not that, hey, you want to be hard-headed, that's your free gift from God. I can accept that and respect that. I'm not out to tell anybody anything. I am only to enlighten the ones, the few, very few people who are actually listening to this, okay? So once again, yes, the parents have been issued this. They're citizens of the States, Canada, whatever. They've been issued this in case the child does want to say, Mom and Dad, I want to become a Canadian. But up until then, people, I have news for you. Your children are not Canadians. They are not Americans. They are not slaves whatsoever until they physically take those papers and say, Mom and Dad, can I use these papers so I can enter the world of sin and apply for a job? Okay, people? So anyhow, once again, I send everybody much peace, love, respect, everybody, government workers, everybody. I'm just out to change the world, and I don't care who you are. I don't hate anybody. I've got no ill will or intent against anybody because I'm not out to do a job. Okay, that might be an inside job if I were to do that. So I'm not into inside jobs and I'm not into outside jobs, right? So I'm going to leave it at this. I've babbled long enough, and I don't think there's any need for me to do any more videos. I think this is the final one. I should have did this video probably about 3-4 years ago. I haven't. I'm just tired of doing this stuff. I'm not tired. I have better things to do, like pick my nose or play guitar or, or go help somebody. That's the way I am. So anyhow, I'm going to leave it at that. Much peace, love, respect, again, out to everybody. Till then, keep your heads up, your sticks on the ice, and God bless and Godspeed. Peace. Bye. Cheers.